Now, we've all seen those movies where some kids mess around with the Ouija board and everything goes terribly wrong, but allow me to—
What are you guys doing?
Get the f out, Sarah! Now allow me to introduce you to the 2014 critically acclaimed movie Ouija. Ouija was directed by Styles White and has an IMDB score of 4.5 out of 10 and a popularity rating of 3,996. Yes, it's that popular. This has got to be my favorite movie of all time, but I won't spoil the surprise as to why. Instead, join me on this journey as we experience art in its truest form. We begin our spiritual journey with our two characters, Lane and Debbie, as they are mere children playing with the Ouija board, and I have no clue where they managed to find it. Debbie then explains the rules of the Ouija board to Lane. The rules being 1, you can never play alone. 2, you can never play in a graveyard. And 3, you must always say goodbye. Debbie tells Lane that if you look through the planchette, it's like you're looking into the spirit world. And this is when we are introduced to the main villain of the movie, Sarah. Just kidding, Sarah is just that second sister that came along to ruin everything. And just like that, we are now introduced to Debbie as she is now all grown up and is already breaking one of the rules and playing with the Ouija board by herself. She then throws it into the fire. Luckily, Lane comes along to save the day by trying to get her to go to the town's basketball game, but Debbie informs her that she's perfectly fine here all by herself. Now that Debbie is alone by herself in the house, all these strange things start occurring, like doors opening randomly and the gas being turned on. And as Debbie makes it all the way back up to her room, we see that laying on the bed is the Ouija board that she just threw into the fireplace. Debbie then decides to look through the planchette for whatever reason, and as soon as she does, her eye goes white. But honestly, what harm can come out of playing with the Ouija board by yourself? Apparently death. Death is the worst thing that can happen by playing with the Ouija board by yourself. In the next scene, Lane is sitting at the diner waiting for Debbie to show up, but we already know she's not going to be making it today. And now we're introduced to Lane's boyfriend Trevor, who's saying how he wants to take her on the surfing trip with the bros. We are then introduced to Isabel, whose first question to the group is, "Where's Debbie?" Yikes. We then get a whole bunch of pointless dialogue between the three until Lane gets a rather important text from her dad. Wonder what that could be about. Lane's first thought is that it has something to do with her sister because she's always causing trouble wherever she goes. See? I told you Sarah was a terrible person. But upon arriving to her house, she finds out it's not Sarah and in attendance is Nona, and you know something's wrong when Nona's here. Lane then learns of what happened to Debbie. In the next scene, we see everybody gathering around for visitations. As the group gathers around, they begin to discuss about what could have caused this, with most of them saying she would have told us if something was wrong. Until Pete comes into the house, who we later learn to be Debbie's boyfriend. As Lane goes up to look through Debbie's room, we see that somebody has taken the time to remove the lights from around Debbie's neck and put them back up onto her shelf counter fireplace thing. The closet door then begins to open and Lane begins to walk in until Debbie's mother walks up behind her. They then reminisce until Lane picks up the planchette and Debbie's mother asks her to watch over the house while they go out for a little vacation. They don't say where they're going or why, they're just going because they're going. Lane then spends the night going through old videos of Debbie. That same night, Sarah decides she's going to be a degenerate and sneak out, but instead gets confronted by Lane, and in this conversation we learn that the mother is no longer part of the picture. Is she alive? Is she dead? Who knows? We then learn at the same time the father is also leaving in the morning for a business trip, but don't worry because Nona is here. Why are all the adults leaving? Why are they just leaving town all of a sudden? Trevor and Lane then stop by Debbie's house to do the chores that Debbie's mother has asked them to do. While watering the plants, Lane hears something coming from upstairs, which leads her to investigate. A flickering light leads Lane into Debbie's room and once again is drawn back into the closet where she finds the planchette and the Ouija board. Lane opens up to Trevor about how she feels guilty about leaving Debbie that night. The next morning, Lane meets up with Pete and asks him if Debbie was acting strange about anything. Pete then explains to her how Debbie didn't even want him to come inside the house, and that same night the same thing happened to Lane whenever she tried to talk to Debbie. Lane meets up with Trevor and Isabel at the diner again and explains to them how she still feels as though Debbie is still in that house, and she persuades them to play the Ouija board at Debbie's house. While Lane is getting ready to leave her house to go to Debbie's to do the Ouija board game, she notices the same car that picked up Sarah the other night is out front again, scaring him off, which now means that Sarah gets to come along for the ride. Yay! Isabel brings up the fact that she feels wrong being in the house, and yeah, you all kinda are, but Lane insists that they need to play the game there because that's where Debbie was and they need to talk to Debbie. Luckily, the dining room is set up in the creepiest of fashion, perfect for Ouija boarding. I think that's what you call it. We also learned that Pete has just been sitting in the back of the house for no reason in the dark, so whenever Isabel goes to turn on the light, I nearly crap myself. The only person who's even slightly reluctant about this whole entire situation is Isabel, but after being reassured that they sell them at toy stores, doesn't care anymore. And now we begin the Ouija board ceremony as they call out to any presence that is there. Of course, the planchette moves, and in stereotypical Ouija board fashion, everyone looks at one another wondering who's pushing the planchette. It's probably Sarah. The planchette then spells out, "Hi friend." Lane asks, "When I was here yesterday, was that you?" And it says yes, and it immediately goes to the letter D, and of course Lane thinks it's Debbie. Lane then asks Debbie why she would do that, or who would do that, or why it happened, and at the same time there's a bump coming from upstairs. Lane then says, "We just wanted to say goodbye to you, Debbie." Then the planchette moves to goodbye, shutting off all the lights in the house at the same time. This then leads to Lane and Trevor going to search the house, and Lane finds that the gas has been turned on again. All I'm saying is this ghost better be paying some gas bills.
Where's my money? I ain't gonna keep asking nice!
Pete now hears the chandelier swinging back and forth, and as he looks down into the mirror, he sees a reflection of what seems to be a silhouette. As he looks closer to it, he gets pulled into it, shattering the mirror. After that spooky night, Lane also brings the Ouija board back home because that seems like a wonderful idea. Nona finds the board in Lane's room and tells her that she shouldn't be messing around with that. Trevor then is on his bike ride and for whatever reason decides to stop riding it once he gets to this creepy tunnel. After he gets spooked by a homeless guy's buggy, he sees on the wall someone has written in chalk, "Hi friend," the same thing from the Ouija board. We then cut to Isabel, who is now taking out the trash at her job. The door behind her slams, and after throwing away the trash and getting to her car, she sees that somebody has written "Hi friend" on the inside of her car window with condensation, only for a hand to wipe it away, but upon opening the door, we see that nobody's in there. We also see Pete back at his desk, and somebody has scratched "Hi friend" to his desk, so whatever is going on, it's now affecting all of them. Now back at Lane and Sarah's house, Lane sees that the back door is open, only for it to slam shut, scaring Lane and Sarah into Lane's room. As they are pressed up against the door, an unseen force slams into it, causing them to go hide into their closet. As she exits her closet, she sees on the laptop somebody has ruined her presentation by putting "Hi friend" in massive letters. Through deductive reasoning, I have figured out the identity of this ghost before the movie even has the chance to reveal it. Yes, they are being haunted by Casper.
Pleasure to meet you, sir.
The gang then meets up in the morning, excluding Isabel because she's too afraid to even leave her house. They all tell the stories of how they got their "Hi friend" and decide that they need to go back to the house to try to talk to Debbie, still under the impression that whatever is trying to reach them is Debbie. They call out to her once again. They ask for a sign of whether Debbie is there or not, and the chair across from them pulls out, while at the same time the planchette launches from everybody's fingertips. Lane then says, "You didn't kill yourself, did you?" And the planchette moves to no. She then asks who it was or if someone did it, and the planchette moves to yes. Pete then asks who did it, and the planchette stays still. Pete then has the good idea to ask Debbie where did they go on their first date. They said they went to the fair, but where did they actually go to see if it's actually Debbie? Pete says, "We went to the lookout by the canyon. Do you remember that? What I said to you?" The planchette then moves to yes, and Pete says, "This isn't Debbie," saying that he never took Debbie to the lookout. Lane then asks, "Is this you, Debbie?" And it says no, and proceeds to spell out DZ. They then find out that DZ is also who Debbie was talking to. Lane then decides to look through the planchette and into the spirit world, but there's nobody in the chair. Instead, DZ is right next to Sarah and Lane with her mouth sewn shut. DZ then spells out on the Ouija board, "Run, she's coming." They then ask who's coming, and it spells out Mother. Lane then looks through the planchette one more time as Debbie points to Mother, and they promptly get the heck out of there. Lane then finds out that the little penguin thing is actually a USB. I have no idea how she didn't know this beforehand. On this USB appears to be somewhat of a vlog where Debbie has cleaned out the attic, showing that she found the Ouija board in her attic. There is then a video of Debbie playing alone with the Ouija board in her room. It also proceeds to spell out "Hi friend," showing that whatever is haunting them is the same entity that was haunting Debbie. We then see Isabel getting ready for the night, but as she's flossing her mouth becomes sewn shut, showing that this ghost doesn't care about dental hygiene and manages to pull off this really cool Chris Angel levitation trick before being slammed into the sink, causing her death. We then cut to the principal talking to Lane as he thinks that they are all struggling with suicide. Lane says, "You have no idea what you're talking about," when from the outside this probably does just look like a whole bunch of teenage kids killing themselves. But how does the one with Isabel look like a suicide? Did she just bang her head into the sink until she killed herself? I don't think very many teens are killing themselves by slamming their head into the sink. And now Trevor blames Lane for Isabel's death. Lane then explains to Pete that it's just them now, and whatever it was, Debbie made it mad. So they then decide to return to Debbie's house, where we once again see the lights that were used to hang Debbie once again back up on her nice little fireplace here. Lane then proceeds to go into the attic to try to look for more clues. While in the attic, Lane finds more pictures of the mother. While she is up there though, it's clear that something else is up there with her. The two of them then decide to try to find a way to find out who's in these pictures, so they decide to start looking up missing people. They then find an article saying that a girl by the name of Doris Zander went missing and lived in the same house as Debbie. It was also suspected that the mother had something to do with the disappearance. In the picture, they see two girls, meaning that Doris most likely had a sister, and if she did, she might still be alive, so Lane decides that she's going to go track her down, and now we find out that this movie is actually part of the whole Conjuring series. Not really, but it's the same woman who plays in all those movies. Lane then begins to confront her about what's going on in the house, and of course the old woman says, "I wouldn't be surprised if there was something in that house." She also explains that mother is the one who stitched together Doris Zander's lips. It turns out that the mother practiced being a medium. Doris did everything she could to help her mother, even becoming a vessel. The mother then went insane, sewing together her own daughter's lips to stop the voices. The mother then killed Doris, and upon seeing this, the sister killed her own mother, leading to her being locked where she is now. The woman then asks her how she saw her mother, realizing that they used the spirit board, then explaining to them that the link between her and the spirits are becoming stronger. She then tells them about a secret room in the basement that the mother tried to seal up. She explains that they need to cut the stitches from Doris' mouth and hope that she will be strong enough to fight off mother. Upon making it into the basement, Trevor is immediately attacked by a shadow, splitting the group between Sarah and Lane and Trevor and Pete. Lane then manages to find the secret room and the body of Doris. As Sarah is waiting for Lane at the end of the entrance to the secret room, she gets abducted by an unseen force. Lane then proceeds to cut the bindings on Doris's mouth, setting the spirit free and banishing the spirit of the mother. And now everything is fixed, right? Well, it would appear so, as Trevor and Pete are able to leave their locked room and they all return home. Well, that same night, Pete returns to his room and Debbie is there, only to be replaced by the spirit of the small child, which then appears to possess Pete, meaning maybe the daughter was the evil one. Man, never saw that one coming. Lane then gets a message from Trevor saying that something has happened to Pete. Lane then goes to confront the old woman again, and the old woman says she's free. Lane then figures out the mother was trying to protect them and stop them from releasing the evil that was within her daughter. Yeah, you think? It then turns out that the old woman has been hearing voices of all the evil spirits talking to her, and they promised her that if she got the kids to unleash her spirit, then they would leave her be and instead now go for the kids. The two sisters now ask Nona what to do, and she says they must break the connection or else it will keep coming for them. Nona then tells them that they must destroy the little girl's body and the board to fully break the connection. Upon Trevor arriving to the house, he's lured to the back by Sarah, but when he gets back there, she's nowhere to be found. Instead, behind him is the spirit of the little girl, throwing him into the pool as he struggles to try to get out of the pool cover. The sisters enter the house not knowing that Trevor is struggling outside. Standing in the living room is soaking wet is Trevor. As he turns around, we see his mouth has been sewn shut. After Trevor turns into a puddle on the floor, the two sisters head down into the basement. After lighting the furnace, Sarah gets dragged into the spirit room, conveniently also where the girl's body is. Instead of finishing the job with Sarah, Lane is now messing with the Ouija board by herself and says, "I'm playing alone, you have to play, Doris." Good thing this evil girl likes to play by the rules. Since Doris is a true gamer, she begins to play with Lane. Doris then begins to try to possess Lane, but at the same time, Debbie shows up to help fight against the evil spirit, and luckily the spirit of a dead friend is much stronger than the spirit of an evil demon, and at the same time, Sarah chucked the body into the furnace while Lane now throws in the board as well. After doing so, now Doris becomes an imprint on the wall. It's clear now that some time has passed as Lane is looking over the pictures of her dead friends. Lane says that sometimes you don't get to say goodbye, and sometimes that's okay, reliving how she wanted to say goodbye to Debbie and by doing so release the evil spirit. After re-entering her room, Lane sees the planchette now above all the pictures of her friends. She then decides to look through it, and that's the end of the movie. So was the spirit destroyed? Is it still alive? Who knows, but her friends aren't. And that's the 2014 movie Ouija. What a masterpiece it truly is. Now, a lot of you may be asking, Lizardmon, why is this your favorite movie? This movie seems terrible, it's downright awful, it seems like garbage. Why would this be your favorite movie? Well, that's because in 2014, on October 31st, I went to go see this movie. And I went to go see this movie with the person who would mean so much more to me in my whole entire life than anybody ever has or anybody ever will be. And without this movie, this was the very first date that I ever went on. And I know this probably sounds really unorganized and unscripted, but It's because it is, and I'm just trying to speak from the heart, but this movie I went to go see with my girlfriend for our very first date, and today we are actually celebrating we're actually celebrating our 8-year anniversary, and every day I always think about how lucky I am to have her and how lucky I am to even have her as a part of my life, and I'm just so thankful for every day that I get. And I just want to say that I love you, Cheyenne, and that and even though this movie might be terrible, I am so thankful that I got to see it with you. And I just want to say happy anniversary, and I love you so much, and I'm always going to love you, and I mean that forever and always. So thank you, Cheyenne. I love you.